Hi, students. Welcome to video 33 on sewage treatment. So there are two different things that you can have in your home when you flush the toilet or take a shower and the water goes down the drain. You either have a septic tank or you have city water, which is like a community huge septic tank. So septic tanks are used usually where there's not big cities, there's not any combined sewage systems. Where you can send the water and get it back. These would also be for people usually who are having well water instead of city water. So basically, it is a container under the ground at your home where every time you flush or you do anything with the water, it filters or sends this water down into that container. And the water sits there, all the solids settle to the bottom. It's got bacteria in it so that it can actually break down the waste in there so that it's not toxic. And every once in a while, you have to actually clean it out, otherwise, it'll get stopped up. If you have any kind of septic system before and you've seen it be stopped up, you actually will see the sewage water start to leak out onto the surface. And it may smell very bad because basically it's poo water that's coming out on the surface of your lawn. So if you don't have a septic system, you have city water that has to go through a sewage treatment plant, also called wastewater treatment plants. So basically what we want to do here is we want to remove anything that's bad so that the water can be put back on the surface into lakes and rivers where we can actually get it and use it for drinking water. So we're separating solids by physical processes. We're also using biological and chemical processes. So primary treatment is a physical process. Basically imagine kind of like a coffee filter. We're using screens and things like that to remove anything that might be in there. So most of the waste, like fecal matter that you actually think of, by the time it gets to the treatment facility, it's already dissolved in the water. So usually those are not the solids that we're talking about. We're talking about wood, paper products, rags, plastics, anything. Children might, flush toys down the drain, something like that. Ladies, if you're on your period and you're having, tampons and things like that, these are going to be removed by these screens. So what we do is we take these and we dispose of them in a landfill after we've dried them, sometimes purified them in different ways with disinfectant, but they all go to a landfill. Same thing with grit and sand. So these are put in settling tanks, and any of the big materials like coarse grain sand or anything like that will go down to the bottom and basically be scraped away and put in a landfill. So another thing we do in primary treatment is called flocculation. Most particles in water have a negative charge. So what we do is we take flocculants that have a positive charge and we mix it into the water. And what that does is it attracts the negatively charged particles. Once that happens, and you put them in settling tanks, kind of like these pictures down here. So here's small particles, flocculants that are added, and these clumping bits actually get heavy, and then they will settle out to the bottom. And we can get and kind of scrape the bottom of them away. So this is another primary treatment thing that we do. And everything else ends up going into these settling tanks. 70% of your solids will settle out at this primary treatment stage. So after you've used a screen, then you just kind of imagine big, huge containers, and they're just sitting there, and anything that's heavier than the water will sink down to the bottom. Now, in a lot of this situation, this includes some of the heavier particles like feces when you flush that down the toilet. This is called sludge at this stage, so it includes some of that organic material. And basically, these are, nutrients. It's heavy in nutrients that we could actually use on farms. So in some situations, we take this sludge, which is kind of like what this looks like up here, and we do some other treatment things to it to get rid of any kind of bacteria or viruses or things like that. And then we actually ship it off to farmers so they can use it at sludge treatment on their farms. So in a way, we're kind of recycling all of these nutrients and putting it back on our food. So secondary treatment is a biological process. We use microorganisms to break down the materials. So all of these tanks right here, kind of this frothy looking stuff is a product of the bacteria that are breaking down, or the microorganisms that are breaking down the bacteria. This is the kind of smelly stage of the treatment process. So what we can actually do is we can increase the rate at which this bacteria, or the breaking down of this bacteria actually happens by adding air into it. So basically what we do is we'll take it and we'll throw it up into the air, and that actually aerates the water. It also gets rid of kind of nasty gases that give it a bad smell, and it adds oxygen to our water, which is what the whole aeration idea is about. And then afterwards, the water will settle. After the secondary treatment, it will settle again in settling tanks, and anything else that has basically been broken down by the biological processes will settle out as well. So looking at kind of the grand scheme of things, here's your primary treatment. This will be your screening. Here's your grit chamber, like a sedimentation tank for sand and gravel. This will be your settling tank for any other kinds of waste that are heavy. Then this might be your aeration tank, another settling tank, and then now we're going to go on to the second stage, or the last stage. So here's your primary treatment, and then all of this is usually called secondary, but disinfection is usually a separate thing, which is how we're going to handle it. So tertiary treatment is your chemical treatment. Basically what you do is you use different chemicals like chlorine or ozone are added to the water to kill any pathogens that are there. We also use ultraviolet light to kill bacteria. Those are just some of the ways that we can actually do this. All right, bring your questions and be ready for a quiz tomorrow.